The courtroom was tense before the tape even started. It was day 12 of proceedings. People had begun treating the daily sessions like a grim routine. Journalists sipping lukewarm coffee, sketch artists shading the same faces from new angles, and legal analysts whispering predictions that barely held weight anymore. But then something changed. Cassie's attorney stood and quietly addressed the judge. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we would like to introduce a new piece of authenticated audio evidence." There was a pause. Judge Harmon looked over his glasses. This wasn't listed in pretrial disclosures. The attorney nodded. It was submitted under seal after being reviewed by federal investigators. It is directly relevant to the timeline. And character references already introduced by the defense. The judge didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back as if he was measuring the weight of something invisible pressing down on the bench. Admitted, he finally said, "But proceed with caution." A low rustle passed through the gallery. Even Diddy's attorney seemed caught off guard. One of them whispered into a phone, eyes wide. Then came the speaker. It was a small black device rolled out on a cart, simple, unassuming. But somehow it felt heavier than all the binders, files, and folders stacked in that courtroom combined. Cassie didn't look at it. She didn't even blink. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale from the pressure behind her. Supporter sat straight and still. No one said a word. The prosecutor clicked. Play. A crackle, then silence. Then a voice, Diddy's voice, low, smooth, confident. He was laughing casually, the kind of laugh that doesn't know it's being recorded. Then another voice responded, and the room changed. It was unmistakable. R. Kelly. The gallery gasped. Even the court reporter paused, her fingers over the keyboard. At first the conversation seemed mundane. They were talking about studio time collaborations, old tour stories. But then the tone shifted. They started discussing control, discipline, keeping people in line. "Diddy, you don't let them think they've got a choice. That's where you lose them." R. Kelly. Exactly. You give too much freedom, you lose the edge. You gotta keep them close. Keep them. Scared, the judge raised a hand, visibly disturbed. One juror covered her mouth. Cassie's eyes didn't move. It wasn't just damaging, it was disturbing. Before we dive deeper into this explosive courtroom moment, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss another truth-packed, jaw-dropping expose just like this. Now, let's get back to the story. Because what played next, it didn't just silence the courtroom, it changed everything. The audio continued. And with every second that passed, the air in the courtroom grew colder, heavier. It wasn't just what was being said, it was how they said it. Calm, confident. Like two men discussing a business deal they'd rehearsed 100 times before. There was no fear, no hesitation, just control. R. Kelly's voice came through again, this time quieter but more disturbing. "You keep their families involved. Makes them think twice. You don't threaten, you remind them." Diddy laughed, that same eerie laugh. That echoed off the courtroom walls. "Man, you've always been 2 steps ahead. That's why they never come for us. Fear is loyalty." Gasps rippled through the room. People leaned in. Others leaned back as if trying to distance themselves from what they were hearing. One woman in the gallery began to cry. She didn't know Cassie, but she knew this feeling. The sound of power being abused. Cassie didn't move. Not a tear. Not a flinch. Her lawyer kept one hand firmly on the desk, the other lightly on her arm. It was the only thing grounding the moment. Everything else had slipped into shock. Then the tape grew darker. They started naming people. Some names were bleeped, others weren't. Female artists, former assistants, tour crew. Diddy mentioned the one who kept asking questions and how they had to get her out before she talked. R. Kelly responded, "Same thing I did with mine. Relocate, new contract, keep the money flowing. They don't talk when their rent's paid." Judge Harmon shifted in his seat. Diddy's lawyers tried to object. "This is prejudicial, it's hearsay." But the prosecutor raised a document, "Your Honor. This recording has been authenticated and verified by 2 separate forensic audio analysts. It was extracted from a backup server, seized by federal agents. Chain of custody is fully intact." The judge hesitated. He looked at Diddy for the first time. The man looked small, not just cornered but exposed. His shoulders had dropped, his jaw had lost its clench. The charisma that once filled arenas and boardrooms had been replaced with silence, and the tape wasn't even over. The next section caught everyone off guard. R. Kelly said, "I keep a folder on every one of them, just in case you never know who's going to flip." Diddy replied, "That's smart blackmail insurance." That line hit like a hammer. Journalists stopped typing. One juror shook his head slowly as if trying to make sense of the madness unraveling. In front of him, these weren't just allegations anymore. These were strategies, systems of silence, methods of manipulation, spoken like protocol. Then finally, after 11 minutes and 47 seconds, the audio clicked off. No one spoke. The courtroom remained frozen. Like time itself refused to move, Judge Harmon cleared his throat. "We will take a brief recess." His voice was dry, stiff, like he too had forgotten how to speak during those 11 minutes. Cassie didn't move from her seat. She looked down at the table, eyes blinking slowly as if waking up from a nightmare she already knew was real. And Diddy? He didn't stand. He didn't turn to his lawyers. He just stared at the speaker as if it had betrayed him because it had his own voice, his own words. No headlines, no lawyers, no PR team, just truth, raw, unedited, and irreversible. And for the first time in a long, long time, no one came to his defense. The hallway outside the courtroom was chaos. Reporters shouted over each other. Phones buzzed non-stop. News alerts were lighting up screens across the globe. Cameras rolled, hands pointed, and journalists scrambled to rephrase what they just heard in court. But there were no perfect headlines for what had just happened. Only one truth echoed from wall to wall. Diddy and R. Kelly had been caught on tape, and what they said couldn't be unheard. The audio clip had already leaked online despite strict security within minutes. It spread across X, TikTok, YouTube, Reddit. Hashtags exploded. Josh Diddy, Kelly, tape Joshua Ashen heard in court. Josh blackmail insurance. Josh said they said it. Influencers began posting reactions. Lawyers streamed breakdowns, and survivors quietly, courageously began to share their own stories in the comments inside the courthouse. Diddy's defense team was unraveling. One attorney argued the tape had been taken out of context. Another claimed voice manipulation, a weak last-ditch effort that was immediately shot down by the prosecution, who reminded the court that the MITRE tape had passed federal audio authentication procedures, and yet it wasn't the legal debate that held the room hostage. It was the silence. Everyone knew this wasn't just a trial anymore. This wasn't just about Cassie. It wasn't even just about Diddy. The courtroom had become a turning point, an unplanned confession booth where an empire built on power, fame, and silence was now collapsing under the weight of its own words. Back in her seat, Cassie stared straight ahead, her face calm, but her eyes held everything. The pain, the courage, the cost. The judge returned after recess, visibly paler, slower. Unsure, you could tell he'd spent the break reviewing the implications behind him. Court security had tripled. Everyone knew something bigger was now in motion. Let the record show, Judge Harmon began, that the evidence presented today will remain sealed from public distribution until further reviews. But the court recognizes its relevance. He looked over at Diddy. "I also advise the defense to prepare for the introduction of additional witness testimony connected to this recording." The tension cracked. The courtroom stirred. New witnesses. Diddy flinched only slightly, but enough that the cameras caught it. His lawyers leaned in, but he waved them off. It was too late. The damage was done. The words were out. The world had heard them, and nothing, no spin, no PR team, no high-powered law firm could undo it. Before we reveal what happened after this breaking moment, including which are new names and are being added to the case, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a single courtroom twist, witness confession, or industry-shaking revelation. This is just the beginning, and what's coming next may change everything. Back in court, the prosecutor stood again. "We intend to call a new witness tomorrow. She's a former assistant to both men on the tape." Diddy looked down. Cassie looked up, and the courtroom, the one that had fallen silent for a recording, was now holding its breath for what was about to come next, because the tape was real. The silence was broken, and the shadows weren't safe anymore. The next morning, there wasn't an empty seat in the gallery. Lines formed outside the courthouse before dawn. Cameramen jostled for position. Commentators livestreamed from their phones, whispering about the now infamous tape as though it were a scene from a movie inside. Even the jury arrived early. Solemn, wide-eyed, visibly different than they had been the day before. Everyone knew that whatever this trial had started, as it was now something else entirely at exactly 9:05 a.m. The judge entered. "Proceed," he said, almost under his breath. "The prosecution stood, Your Honor. We call our next witness to the stand, Miss Talia Morgan." The name caused a stir. It wasn't on any list. It hadn't been mentioned before, but those in the know, those who followed the industry closely recognized it instantly. Talia Morgan, former assistant to Diddy, former coordinator for R. Kelly's tour staff, a woman who had vanished from the public eye nearly 7 years ago after abruptly leaving the industry with no explanation. Rumors surrounded her exit, but no one had ever confirmed why she left. Now she was walking into a courtroom, shoulders straight, hair tied back, eyes focused. She took the oath with no hesitation. Her voice didn't crack. She didn't look at Diddy. Not once. The prosecutor began gently. "Miss Morgan, can you tell the court your relationship to the individuals heard on yesterday's audio recording?" "I worked for Mr. Comey's for 6 years, she said, "and for Mr. Kelly. During a tour in 2014, I was present at 2 private meetings between them. I coordinated several closed-door events and was instructed to clear rooms when certain conversations were about to begin." "What kind of conversations?" the attorney asked. "Conversations like the one you played yesterday," she replied, "about controlling people, about keeping secrets, about manipulating contracts, moving girls across state lines, and keeping staff quiet." With threats and bonuses, gasps echoed through the room. The defense objected. Speculation. Unverified. The prosecutor held up a document. Miss Morgan submitted a sworn affidavit and audio memos, corroborated by time-stamped emails. "We request to enter her statement into evidence." The judge looked shaken but nodded, admitted. Talia continued, her voice steady. "I was instructed never to leave my phone on during meetings, but I did once accidentally, and it recorded everything. That file is what led to the audio you heard yesterday. I turned it over 3 months ago anonymously to federal investigators." Diddy's lawyers froze. He didn't move. Talia kept going. "They had a system," she said. "Women were given roles, artists, assistants, guests. But once inside, their access was monitored. If someone talked too much, asked too many questions, they were either bought out or intimidated." She paused, then looked directly at the jury. "I tried to leave twice. The first time I was told I'd be erased from the industry. The second time I found a tracker on my car. After that, I disappeared." A murmur swept the room. Talia held up a copy of a journal entry dated from the year she quit. It included direct quotes, words Diddy and R. Kelly had said during planning sessions. The prosecutor asked, "Do you fear for your life by being here today?" Talia nodded. "Yes, but I'm more afraid of staying silent." A silence gripped the room again. This one wasn't shock, it was respect. Talia's voice softened. "There were girls younger than me, smarter than me, braver than me, and some of them never made it out. I did, and now I'm here because someone has to be." She looked toward Cassie for the first time. Their eyes met. A subtle, unspoken connection passed between them, one that didn't need words, one built from shared experience and survival. The court recessed soon after, but the gallery remained still, as if no one wanted to leave. Something real had happened. Not just testimony, not just evidence, but truth. Raw and unfiltered, finally being spoken in a room that had silenced so many for so long. And as Talia stepped down from the stand, the judge didn't even bang the gavel. He just watched her walk away and exhaled. The courtroom was officially in recess, but no one left their seat. No one could. The moment Talia Morgan stepped down from the stand, the air changed, not with shock, not with outrage, but with something far more powerful: validation. For the first time, people who had whispered in hallways and online threads, who had hidden behind usernames and burner accounts, had been spoken for under oath on the record, in front of a judge, a jury, and the world. Talia didn't linger. She walked straight down the aisle with her head high, security escorting her out of the room, like she was carrying evidence in her very presence, because in many ways she was. Her words had pierced the fog of legal arguments and technicalities and hit directly at the human core of the case. Fear, survival, and the cost of truth. Cassie remained, still staring at the floor, but her silence wasn't defeat. It was focus. Her entire life had been dissected and debated, but now someone else had confirmed what she'd lived. She was no longer alone in the back row. A woman who had shown up to court every day with sunglasses and a scarf finally took them off. She wiped her eyes and stood up, walking slowly out of the room. Later, reporters would find out she was a former background dancer from a tour Diddy had sponsored years earlier. She never spoke publicly. She didn't need to anymore. Across the gallery, 2 other women followed, unnamed, unnoticed, but no longer invisible by the time court resumed. 45 minutes later, the room was completely different. What had begun as a celebrity trial had become something much heavier. The mood wasn't about gossip or downfall anymore. It was about something being exposed, layer by layer. The judge returned, but even his posture was different, less mechanical, more careful. "The court recognizes the significance of today's testimony," he said, voice calm but weighted. "It has become apparent that the scope of this case may exceed its original intent." The prosecutor stood. "We request that the court allow us to submit a request to expand the witness list. Additional individuals have come forward in light of the leaked recording." The defense objected. "Your Honor, this is an attempt to turn a civil trial into a criminal witch hunt," but the judge didn't flinch. "The court is obligated to pursue credible leads if additional witnesses can be verified and their relevance confirmed. The motion will be considered." Diddy's lawyer sat down there, energy visibly diminished, and he didn't even look at them. His eyes were fixed on the table, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He wasn't controlling the room anymore. The prosecutor turned back to the jury. "This case is no longer about celebrity or reputation. It's about a system, a structure built on silence, fear, and absolute control. We don't just intend to win this case, we intend to pull that system apart." Gasps, tension, and something else resolve outside. The news had already broken. Talia Morgan breaks silence in court. "New witnesses expected in Diddy trial to your R. Kelly connection under federal review." Every network was on it. Every commentator had something to say. But for once, the noise wasn't drowning out the truth. It was amplifying it in the hallway. Federal agents were spotted walking into a sealed side room with folders in hand. No press, no leaks, just protocol. Quiet, measured, intentional, and inside the courtroom as the session continued, Cassie looked over at Diddy for the first time in days. He didn't meet her eyes. He couldn't, because something had shifted forever. She wasn't afraid anymore, and neither were the people who were finally ready to speak. The courtroom felt different now. Not just heavier, bolder. What had once been quiet murmurs and careful questions was now being replaced with sharp, unwavering clarity. This trial wasn't about media hype anymore. It wasn't about celebrity damage control or sensational headlines. It was about reckoning, a slow, relentless storm, fueled by the very people who were never meant to speak. And they were speaking one by one. When court resumed, the prosecution stood again. "Your Honor," the lead attorney said, "we request to enter a new exhibit into evidence, a written statement from a former employee who has chosen to remain anonymous for safety, but whose identity and history have been verified by federal agents." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Was this individual subpoenaed?" "They were contacted," the prosecutor replied. "But after threats and attempted surveillance, they declined to appear publicly. However, their written affidavit and supporting documentation are being offered under protective status." A pause, then a nod. "Enter it," the judge said. "Let the jury hear it." The attorney began to read. The statement came from someone who had worked as a personal assistant, specifically hired to manage scheduling, travel, and guest relations for high-profile gatherings. The letter was long, but it was calm. No theatrics, just details. Cold, sharp, devastating details. They spoke about private events where women were told they'd be meeting record executives but were instead directed to isolated rooms, contracts signed under pressure, with legal jargon too dense to understand, often while intoxicated, or medicated threats made discreetly, never by Diddy himself, but always by someone close. A hidden drawer in an office desk that contained NDAs, cash, and a burner phone used only when someone was about to be handled. The courtroom listened in stunned silence. Diddy didn't react, but his attorneys were visibly shaken. One scribbled frantically in a notepad. Another stared down at the table like he was waiting for it to swallow him whole. The letter continued. The former employee wrote, "I stayed longer than I should have. I left when I realized that silence wasn't loyalty. It was survival. But survival cost me everything. And if my voice can help undo what I helped to build, then let it." When the letter ended, No one moved. Even the judge sat still for a long moment before finally clearing his throat. "Let the record show," he said, "that the statement has been received and acknowledged." Then came the next twist. The prosecutor added, "And, Your Honor, we'd also like to notify the court that the Department of Justice has officially launched a parallel inquiry into matters revealed in the audio and witness testimony. As of this morning, federal subpoenas are being prepared." The gallery gasped. Diddy's lead attorney stood instantly, objection irrelevant to the current civil proceedings, but the damage had been done. The words were out. A federal inquiry. This wasn't just a high-profile trial anymore. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous for Diddy, and he knew it. He sat still, breathing through his nose, fingers tapping rhythmically on the table, no longer a power move, but a nervous tick meanwhile.